Hi, this is Leighton Ginn, the director of development, the director of development for the American Documentary and Animation Film Festival. Probably should edit this a little, but I won't. I'm here with one of my favorite programs at Amdocs every year. It's the Medill students who come out here. They're very talented. They have terrific documentaries, and these kids are all very talented. They're going to change the world someday. And the guy who leads them is this man here, Mr. Brent Huffman, who's run the program for several years, a acclaimed filmmaker himself. And this year we're going to have four films from the Medill group. Brett, thank you for joining us today. And can you tell me about the four films?
Sure. First off, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this. I love these conversations, and I love Amdocs. I'm the biggest fan, and I just want to say you and Teddy do so much to support young filmmakers, and I'd like to think that this group represents the sort of next generation of documentary filmmakers. So yeah, I can start. I'll briefly give a little description of the program. So there are four Medill documentaries this year. Two of the documentaries are focused on Ukraine and the war in Ukraine in some way. So maybe I'll start with them. So there's a short film called Where the Sunflowers Grow, which is a really beautiful, charming and funny, even though it's heavy subject matter, a funny short documentary about kids and their families that have fled the war in Ukraine, and a school and a program that supports them and teaches the kids English and kind of about American culture. And it's a really beautiful, like I said, beautiful, charming short. And then the other film about Ukraine, to Kyiv With Love, follows actually two young Northwestern students who also fled the war in Ukraine and are now undergraduate students at not my students, but students at Northwestern, and they recount their really sort of harrowing story of coming here and their family that are still back in Ukraine, and talk a lot about the war. So it's also an incredible film.
Before you
Uh,
go on, let's touch on the Ukraine topic really quick before I forget. But Ukraine
yeah,
topic,
please.
you guys always touch on great topics. This war's been going on a little while. Why do you think this year we have the two documentaries or something? I mean, obviously this war is going on and there's more content about it, but can you can can you put your finger on why this has become a topic for your students to tackle?
Yeah, so it isn't. There's sort of unrelated projects. So one is actually a graduate student project, and the other are undergraduates. So unrelated, and they were really drawn to the topic. I do think though that Chicago has really welcomed. We're a sanctuary city, so we welcome immigrants and refugees, but we've really welcomed Ukrainian refugees, and we actually have a neighborhood of Ukrainian immigrants. So I think that's maybe part of it. Is just maybe more than other cities around the nation. The Ukrainian war and that story is a bigger deal in Chicago, and we have a bigger kind of emotional connection to that
And
story.
it seems important because I think maybe people are forgetting about a little about the war there, which is, has been going on for a lot longer than I expected, but also, there's so much going on that, kind of gets pushed away and probably shouldn't get pushed away. So I'm really grateful that your students have done these two stories.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there's too many wars and too many conflicts all happening at the same time. Yeah, and I agree. They're all important and should be given equal weight. So I hope refocusing on Ukraine during the festival, that would be amazing.
Okay.
And then the other films are unrelated to Ukraine.
Okay.
So
Okay.
um, Cherish is a incredibly powerful short documentary that is an inspiring story, though it comes from a really sort of terrible place. So, you know, Chicago is plagued with gun violence. it's a perpetual story, unfortunately. And the main character of Cherish, if you can believe it, over a span of 20 years, actually loses both of her adult children to gun violence in a very similar sort of way. And both of her kids that are killed in sort of random acts of violence. So it's a shooting that doesn't involve her kids, but both her son and her daughter get hit by stray bullets in completely different scenarios in a way over the span of 20 years. And it's as tragic. And I mean, I have two kids. I couldn't imagine even wanting to sort of go on living, I guess, after losing them. But the main character of Cherish, not immediately, but over the years, has sort of become this incredible activist for gun violence causes and ending gun violence in Chicago. Both of her kids' murders go sort of uninvestigated by Chicago police, especially her son's murder. There was sort of no follow up, and the killer is sort of out there, and the police have sort of thrown up their hands and aren't doing anything about it. And the main character is really pushing to find the killer, and to push for gun violence reform and gun reform in Chicago. So she's become this really sort of inspirational activist, and turned, this horrible grief into kind of this passion for activism. And then Keep Her Safe, the last film, is also an incredible film that looks at sex workers in Chicago, and it's a really sort of intimate and eye-opening look at the industry, with incredible access and incredible honesty. And the main characters of that film are also working as activists to try to raise awareness about sex work in the city, the problems around it, and really working to pass laws to protect sex workers. So even though there's just four shorts this year, an incredible range of topics and subject matter about life in Chicago. So I'm really excited about these films and about the premieres.
Can you tell me, from the four you've seen, all very diverse and very different, what are some of the things that you learned that you didn't know from just watching these documentaries from any of these topics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that even though I've been doing this for a long time, I think almost three decades, I've been working if you can believe it, as a filmmaker, and I've been teaching at Medill for 17 years. But I always learn something. So, and I would say I always get something from working with the students too, like learn something from them, even though they're just sort of starting out. And I think maybe overall in these four films, I think just the level of trust and access that the students were able to get with their subjects. The Cherish film comes to mind. Like, this is an incredibly painful thing for. So Cherish is the Miss Cherry is her name, is the mother that loses her kids. So she recounts, basically the two worst days of her life in the film, right? When her two kids were killed, and her response to it, which is, again, both relatable, but just sort of unreal to kind of live this nightmare. But the students were able to gain her trust, right, and to really I don't know if you can imagine, give her an environment where she feels like she can talk about these things, right? Like that's just sort of an incredible thing to, trust undergraduate students with this kind of story, and then just to speak on it, to sort of relive it in the moment, right? And then to speak on it with this, openness and honesty. So in that film, she talks about when her daughter was killed, that she tries to go to like a bad neighborhood downtown Chicago, and she hopes someone will kill her, so she won't have to feel anymore. And
Oh
she,
my.
that's a kind of a crazy thing to talk about to young students. But I think she trusted them enough to sort of say, like, this is how I responded, is that, you know, I hope someone would also shoot me, or like a car would. She was like in the street hoping a car would run over her, just so she wouldn't have to feel this pain anymore. And then, like I said, and then over the course of the film, she's able to transform that grief into activism, into, you know, I want to, make a world where this never happens to another mother, Um, so yeah, I think there's moments like that that are just really, sort of incredible. Even though these are, first time filmmakers learning the craft, they are able to kind of do these incredible things.
If you get a chance, I don't know if you have it. If she has a nonprofit that people could support, can you just send it to me, and we'll put it in the description for
Of
anyone wants to
course,
support.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I that's probably true for all the films, that there's some,
Sure.
but certainly, yeah, yeah, Miss Cherry's nonprofit, that would be amazing.
Okay, so we'll put that there in the description. If anyone who goes to the film and is inspired, there's a way they can help and support. Speaking about help and support, you had a great program last year where you worked with the prison system. Um, can you talk? Can you explain that a little bit better? Because I can't explain it quite well because it's so complex. But can you talk about that and the kind of impact that it had from last year? Because I know you guys have been going around and showing those films, and it's gotten a lot of people's attention.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of complicated. Where should I start? So um, I teach this class inside a prison in Chicago. So it's a maximum security prison in central Illinois. I actually taught the class at Stateville Prison, and now at this different prison, Sheridan. Um, and in the class, I mean, there are probably other there's lots of teaching inside of prisons actually that goes on across the country, but I think it's the only program where over the course of a quarter, I bring Northwestern undergraduates into the prison with cameras, and we collaborate with incarcerated students that are in an education program at Northwestern, which we could spend the whole time talking about, but it's also incredible, where incarcerated people can get actual Northwestern degrees in 4 years. So my undergrad students work with these incarcerated students to tell a story together. And in the films, the stories are usually wrongful conviction stories, or stories about a family situation with incarcerated students, or if a student's about a story about the 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 crime and the situation that led them to be incarcerated. So it's this really sort of incredible thing where we have all this access, and it's not without incredible hurdles all the time and problems all the time, as you can imagine. But we have this access to tell these stories and collaborate with incarcerated people, and it's an incredible class. And then last year, this is true for all of the Medill films, Amdocs has been this really great place to premiere this work, and almost like the springboard to kind of start the life of these films. So two of the films, especially that played, Hey Hugo and Jeffrey Come Home, have gone on to kind of do just incredible things. There's been over 50, if you can believe it, over 50 screenings, different film festivals. The what's it called? Double Exposure Investigative Film Festival in Washington D.C. Was a premiere site. Middlebury in Middlebury, Connecticut. New Filmmakers, one of the films played there. Hey Hugo actually won Best Documentary at the Chicago International Film Festival in their Cine Youth program, which is like a young filmmaker program. and that film has won, I think, 3 or 4 awards so far. So yeah, I think the films have done incredible things, and the class is not set out to. I mean, we're a short class in a 10-week period. The class is not set out to. Um, it's not an innocence project class, so there's not a legal component of the class to help the incarcerated people, but the films have actually gone on to find lawyers for the main subjects of the films. So the films do go actually have an impact and help the incarcerated students in the films.
How important is it for you to have an impact? Obviously, with the program last year, you being a filmmaker, and the films have had impacts. This is just a small sample of what your program has done. Can you talk to me about how important it is to not just make films, but have an impact beyond the films, and then and some of the other films from the past have had a lot of impact that kind of front of your memory.
Yeah, yeah, and certainly I think the biggest one is Finding Ying Yang that went to Paramount Plus, but was launched as a student short at Amdocs that actually that sort of started this trajectory where it becomes a feature length film, and then um, it gets picked up for distribution. Um, but I would say the impact question. I would say the impact is most important. Um, and I think the reverse is also true. Like the worst thing that could happen is that the films hurt the subjects, right? So there's a real emphasis put on that, if we feel we're making something that would harm, especially, a lot of these films are fragile communities, vulnerable communities, right? So I think this idea of do no harm is really at the forefront. But beyond that, I think my big goal, and I think the thing that I would hate is that the films just sort of sit in a closet somewhere and don't get seen, right? My push is that not only they go out into the world, they get seen at incredible venues like Amdocs, but then that they have this impact. And really, the impact that we want is that they help the subjects of the films. They help these vulnerable communities in the films in some way.
I mean, I've seen it. I got a chance to meet Jenny, who did Finding Ying Yang, and I think she's working on her second film, is what I heard.
She
Or
is, yeah. She got major ITVS PBS money actually before PBS got hit with all these. It probably wouldn't
oh,
happen today.
oh,
Got hit with all these funding challenges, let's say. But yeah, she got kind of an enormous funding for this new film that's a similar kind of topic. Um, yeah, and I think Amdocs is sort of twofold. Amdocs was this great launching pad for Jenny's career, honestly. Um, uh, and I think that's something that happens with these student films too, but also a way to really raise awareness and spread the story of Ying Yang and I think really spread this story of which sadly is still an issue now of immigrants' rights and protecting immigrants as they come over to the U.S. to study. And unfortunately, that's a film that's maybe even more important now as I'm thinking about it, right? To spread that awareness.
Jenny made a very powerful film. It still sticks with me, so she did a great job. But you touched on it also that she got funding from PBS before the cuts. How important is it for these documentaries today? Obviously, they're finding less support because of various decisions by people in the administration. How 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 important is it to support documentaries, what and how do you keep your students motivated? Because it starts to look more and more bleak as a journalist for various reasons, and then funding for documentaries gets affected as well. Um, Can you talk about that as how you keep your students motivated, or maybe they're just self-motivated, but in this atmosphere, it does look troublesome for journalism and content creators and storytellers. But obviously, just from what you're telling about the four films coming this year, they were very inspired and told powerful stories. What do you do in this situation to kind of keep them motivated and focused in a tough time?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and I think you know, maybe what was it? Maybe it's probably been over 5 years ago where we were in kind of this real golden age of documentary, actually, where um, you know streaming sites, online sites. I think everyone was wanted to be in the documentary business, and you had documentaries premiering at Sundance that were picked up for nearly $1 million, right? And you had this bidding war for documentaries. Like it was an incredible time for for this industry, and yeah, I think now we're seeing a lot of challenges that I hope are temporary. Challenges of funding. I mean, challenges in academia, right? About teaching in general and teaching journalism. And we're seeing a real crisis in journalism, not only on this side, but on every. I think the crisis in print journalism is even worse. A crisis in photojournalism. I mean, where you kind of just see the whole thing sort of contracting. And I do believe it's a temporary thing. Like I do believe that it is not forever. That this will change. And I've been in this industry a long time. There's always these kind of highs and lows. And we're certainly in a low. This is certainly a low point. So I'm hoping we have nowhere to go but up. But I think if I am able to inspire students, which I try to, I certainly try to inspire them. It's just that I think it's twofold: how powerful documentaries can be to represent our lives and the world that we live in, and the emotion that we feel, and empathy to other people's stories. You know, I'm biased, but I would argue documentary is the best form to do that, to tell emotional stories that allow audiences to really feel, and then audiences to want to help, to get involved with the story. I would argue documentary is the best way. And then there still are a lot of healthy documentary careers that exist, so the situation isn't completely dire. And the funding situation also isn't completely dire. But like I said, it's a low point that I hope we will work our way through. But I think I try to I'm deeply in love with the documentary medium, and I try to share that love and that passion for the medium. And I think even in this low period, you'll see that with these new films, this love of the medium, and really using using the medium to tell these powerful emotional stories. I forget who said it, but I thought of this when we talked about this. There's a great quote, and I'll probably misquote it, but it's something like a country without documentaries is like a family without a photo album.
Wow,
Yeah, so
that's great.
yeah, that's kind of how I see documentaries, right? It's this sort of shared memory and this reflection of what it means to be human, what it means to be American during this time, right? And especially with all I think the terrible things that are happening, creating these, documenting what's happening and documenting these stories is so important. And without it, without documentaries, it is almost like a family without a photo album, right? We don't have a way to kind of remember and look back at, what happened and how we felt when it was happening.
I'll take it a little further. I know we've had a few documentaries, and there's about caregiving, stuff like that, and I've told people about them because I think what you do is when you show these struggles that people have trying to take care of the parents, other people who watch, they feel less alone because it's so isolating when you're a caregiver. And that's just one aspect of it. But um, that's just one of the many powers of documentaries and truth and building community and making people feel less alone who are going through real struggles, which I think that's what your documentaries, your students' documentaries do. The one thing I'll ask you to go further about this is, we are going through a downside, but and you can agree or disagree with me, but I don't think the appetite for documentaries has changed. I think people want truth. They want depth in the stories. It's just other influences that are bringing us to a down point, but there's just as much, if more interest in documentaries. Um, uh, if you had a chance to control the world, what would you do to make documentary filmmaking and accessibility to watch these documentaries? What would you do to kind of to change that? I mean, because they're excessive, they're not on. There's gatekeepers who are just not buying them, which doesn't seem like good business sense. It's because it's so much cheaper to make them, and the potential to turn a profit is a lot better. But what would you do to change to make a documentary filmmaker to documentary films to be more accessible for people to watch and be educated, but also for filmmakers to make a good living on it? What are things
Yeah,
that should
boy,
change?
that's a great question. And if you know a way to make that happen, to give me the power to change the world, I would love. I could get started right now. But I think the word education is most important that you just said to me. I think if I could change things, and I think that's I don't want to make this conversation turn this conversation political, but I do think this current administration is doing a lot to harm education and to harm the grade school education, right? To pull funding away from that, to harm higher education, to harm. So I'm a professor at Northwestern, to harm this. I don't want to call it an industry, but to harm education
Institution.
in general, institution, yeah, to harm these just incredible nonprofit entities, right? Like PBS, that it's in some ways it's their job to use documentaries to educate, right? And I think there's this belief that I feel the administration wants to harm education because people that aren't educated are easier to control, right? And they're easier to sort of sell terrible, terrible things, right? Like this war in Iran is easier to sell to people that are not educated, right? So it's very simple. So I think to change things, it would be to undo all of those, all of those things, right? And to invest in education like it is the most important thing that we can, protect and to put money into, right? And I think, as you said about the, films about caregivers, right? And the great thing about like the caregiver idea is that this is not some far out there story. This relates to everyone. You just might not know it relates to you yet, right? Like this is something that will happen to you at some point in your life, right? So part of the documentary is, this emotional storytelling that's really compelling, but it's also education, right? It's like
Hmm.
this is something that will happen to you, and you know, if there's problems, which I'm sure there are, like these are problems that you'll have to face, and these are the kind of ways to face them. And then I love what you said too about, you're not alone. You might feel alone, but this is a shared experience, right? And there are, communities that you can share this experience with. You don't have to sort of face these things alone. And that's the same thing about the war films too, is that, my fear is that there are Americans that when they see that Iran's being bombed, they might feel like that has nothing to do with them and they don't care about it. And, a girls' school was bombed, and all the kids died, and there might be people, Americans, that hear that and think that has nothing to do with me, right? Or you know, they believe whatever the sort of propaganda that's being spread about why that's happening. But what a documentary could do is to show that that schoolgirl in Iran is just like, your daughter, or a girl that you know, or just like you, right? And that you should care about this thing that's happening, and it's this relatable story that you can feel empathy for. And I think if you were educated, you would be against all wars and against this sort of conflict, right? And I think sort of see through, you know, the reasons why the conflict is happening. So yeah, I would, if I had, you know, godlike powers, I think I would refocus us on education, and documentaries, journalism. These are crucial parts of education and educating people all through their life, right? So not just in schools, but like how PBS educating adults, or anyone. And PBS is free too, right? Anyone can turn this on and have access to this sort of whole world of knowledge. All of those things are being terribly threatened now.
Yeah. I also say this. I've told people this as I progressed through this festival, and inspired by you too, is when I talk to people, I give rides to people doing some Lyft and Uber rides, and I tell people, they'll tell me their stories. Says, have you ever considered doing a documentary? You can do a documentary with your cell phone. I think that starts to empower people, that your story means something. I think everyone has a voice. So with documentaries, where I try to tell people that you can do a documentary too, because you have a voice. And my film festival will give you a platform to tell your stories. And through that stories, I think people start to feel empowered, and they start to look at other documentaries, because I think, if you have skin in the game, and then you start going through the process, and you start having appreciation of what documentaries do and the powers that they have. But it's also, it empowers people, and it brings people together. It's just a technical aspect to the human experience of connection. And that's what I like about documentaries. I like what I love about journalism, and those are the things that I've spread. And just so you know, that is inspired by you, and especially with your program last year with the prisoners, because I think that really that was very inspiring. That they have a voice, even though they're incarcerated, they can tell what their stories are and find them an audience. So those are my feelings, and that's just what I try to do when I'm out there.
Yeah, I totally agree, and thank you for that. And especially, I would add that everyone's voice matters, right? And maybe as you're telling, if someone's riding with you and you're telling them that, maybe that's the first time they ever thought about that, was that, oh, my life could be, other people could see my life and think that, that it's important, and that the things that I'm going through are something that maybe they're going through too, right? And there's this sort of shared empathy and shared experience. I mean, I love that. And for the incarcerated people, that's the only way for their story to be told, right? And in a lot of ways, their stories were sort of taken from them. The stories of their lives were taken from them and sort of twisted, right, into kind of these awful things. So this is a way for them to tell their own stories, and kind of take ownership of their own story, which sounds like a very simple sort of thing, but for them, they've been.
And I think it's just talking about this right now is just what made me miss what Twitter originally was. These world events would go on, and you have people who were boots on the ground just using their cameras and filming it, and they would put it on Twitter, and we could see it instantaneously. And we don't get opinions, we get facts that we can surmise what's going on from these facts, from people who are doing it. And unfortunately, Twitter's changed a lot, but I would encourage people to keep shooting that, and you don't have to put it on social media, but you can start piecing together and make your own story, your own documentary. And our documentaries are as short as 3 minutes, but a 3-minute story can be very powerful. that's a long story on a newscast, and even those stories are also very powerful in invoking change.
Totally right. Yeah, a 3 minute story could change someone's life. Totally.
Exactly. Well, we're running out of time, Brent. We would go on and on.
No,
As
this has been
always,
great. Yeah.
I appreciate our conversations with you. I appreciate what you do for documentary, inspiring this next generation of journalists and filmmakers. And just so people know, your program's still on Sunday?
Saturday. So yeah, unless it's changed, it
Saturday,
is
4 o'clock.
Saturday the 28th. Yeah, it's Theater 2, March 28th, which is a Saturday at 4:30 p.m.
Okay. So 4:30, come out to the Palm Springs Cultural Center and catch and be inspired by some young, brilliant students who've told some amazing stories and just part of a legacy that Brett has created over at Medill School of Journalism. Just a reminder, everyone, March 25th to 29th is the American Documentary and Animation Film Festival at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. Go to www.amdocfilmfest.com to go look for tickets, and please support Brent and support some of these films and these topics. We're going to put some of those nonprofits down there if you want to support them. As always, Brent, thank you so much for everything you do and speaking with me again this year. And we look forward to seeing the future of filmmaking and journalism on Saturday at 4:30.
Great. I want to say thank you so much for doing this and for all your support of these students and the Medill program. And yeah, like I said, we love Amdocs. It's an incredible festival. It'll change your life. So please come out.